Greetings, friends. In this video, I thought we could look back, or I could look back on MGTOW, because it's something I don't really talk about anymore. I used to watch a lot of MGTOW videos 2016 to 2017. I think by 2018, I was starting to really watch less MGTOW content because I was already familiar with a lot of the general ideas. And I don't think anyone ever controlled the conversation in that online community. So there was just the manosphere, and there were a lot of ideas in the manosphere. There was the P.U.A. or pickup artist community. I wasn't really familiar with that. When I heard MGTOW, that was the first time that I was hearing truths that I hadn't heard spoken before. It made so much stuff make sense. Like my friend agrees with me too, and like he was saying, yeah, he could see it too at the time, and like we were listening to maybe Sandman, because Sandman was also in Toronto. It's like these faceless people, like spitting these bitter but resonating truths. Like these things were resonating, so there's no denying that there was a lot of truths. And it's beyond the scope of this video to get into all the stuff they were talking about. But generally, like, how are men, how are women, like, who are we as men? What is going on when men and women get into a relationship? What are some of the things that can happen? And just a whole set of terminology and language to describe the situations, like a shit test and like a simp, or a white knight, a beta male, or a cuck, all these things, which are still part of my vocabulary today, more or less. Yeah, there was definitely, it played a role in my journey towards becoming more conservative and eventually getting into Christianity again once I was in my 30s. So MGTOW played a role in that. A lot of the original content was about how men getting screwed over in family court, and all the pitfalls and psychological games you can get dominated by, and the way some men just serve women at any cost, and how pathetic it is. It was just a continuing conversation, which did get increasingly censored. And I guess it's still around today, but I don't know if they managed to keep growing the trend or the name. It might have been clamped down on, more or less. A lot of the notable channels were taken down. I would listen to like Big John, like MGTOW is Freedom, a few other channels. Sometimes Turd Flinging Monkey. He had some good stuff, but also he was kind of dirty. He just had a dirty way of talking about things all the time, and so but I'll give TFM credit for really hammering home the idea of women's rights, maybe, rethinking, like, is this a good thing? Like, and I mean that was a pretty base thing to do. He hammered that point home enough, and it even drove a wedge between him and that other guy that who used to come on his show. but that's all pointless. But no, like the whole sex dolls, that kind of stuff. No thanks. That stuff is really weird. That stuff is really messed up. So nah. And unfortunately, like, I mean, I guess MGTOW was always very misunderstood. I mean, that's natural, and stigmatized, like, oh, you not just losers, but something either to be ignored or laughed at. I'm just talking of content producers that I've seen. I'm not saying everyone who might be interested in these ideas is like that, but a lot of the content it centers on women and the problems and how they can't respect a man. And I mean, I guess that's true, but that's kind of a negative thing to obsess over. Like, it's one thing to have a series of videos on these topics. So MGTOW never said blame women. That's one. At least the guys I listened to, they never said blame. It was never about blaming women. But I would say that I'm open to getting married, and in a more ideal situation, I would certainly like to be married. But I mean, I'm going to be 35 pretty soon, and so it's like, the prospects are bleak. Like that, I'm in a big city. It's like I'm trapped in the bug box with insect people. But God can lead things to happen, and that has happened in my life. So don't throw in the towel or anything. But you adapt, and you don't let your life, the meaning of your life, be dictated by what other people think. That's stupid. Like, God has a plan for you, but that is sort of the bleak situation. Like, just the relations between men and women from the millennial generation on, maybe from before that. Well, from before that, as well, but it got pretty bad with the millennial generation, like the relations between the men and the women, just for various reasons. Internet dating is not something I could ever do with any dignity. It was just completely undignified position for a man. Oh, here's another thing I took away from this. Like, a woman will not respect a man who has no backbone. Obviously, I mean, that's something you could get somewhere else, but men need to hear that sort of thing. TFM tried to use Nietzsche's philosophy to give MGTOW philosophy a grounding, like how you can live your life and be self-fulfilled in a godless world. And I mean, obviously, I wasn't convinced, but so some of them, they tried to fill out this philosophy, but because it had no grounding, you move on, and a lot of people just stopped using the label, I think. For maybe because they didn't want to use it, or because they were worried that it was getting censored because of using that label. It wasn't exactly a good thing or a bad thing. It was what it was. It had a good role in its place, in its time, communicating these truths to men that really needed to hear them. And of course, it's going to just fade away, but that same spirit will continue to influence men. Now, I don't necessarily mean that it's good to teach men and women to not produce families. Yeah, I don't know how someone could keep producing this sort of content again and again and again. Like, I don't know how you could keep doing that. It would become a little taxing, I think, on your soul. So I would just advise moving on from that headspace, at least. However you're going to live your life, but just existing in that world of making content along those lines and watching that kind of content all the time. That's why I find it interesting how Sandman could just continue to produce all these videos over the years, just every day a new video where he reads a script. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons he can do it, is he just reads a script, but he still has to write these things. But then in early 2020, before the pandemic was really taking off in the news, or just around the time that it was, but it hadn't been very long, he was talking in one of his videos, this is Sandman, saying in one of his videos that he was wearing a mask outside already, and that people were giving him looks that they were weirded out. But I mean, he was always extremely health conscious or suspicious of various things that can affect his health. So I understand his extremely cautious measures, but Sandman was never the same after I heard that. The fact that he had admitted doing this, like wearing the mask out in public. I mean, he of all people was constantly talking about the threat of socialism and the Liberal Party and this big bureaucratic state that the man has to protect himself against, and then he was straight into that stuff. And I noticed that he's been messed up by a series of relationships. Well, one or two major relations. He's been messed up by that, and he's still like finding energy to do videos, maybe in a way because of that. I don't know how to make sense of it, but and also P.U.A, the Australian guy, he produces quality content. But again, like how you can focus on this stuff, like primarily, solely, that I don't know. I'm just assuming he's gone through a lot of, probably several relationships too, that have probably kind of messed him up a little bit. Oh yeah, and the last thing I would say is I wouldn't explicitly say don't get married. We want people to get married. I'd like to get married. I can see the prospects maybe aren't so great, but you know, it is a healthy thing for most men to do. But nonetheless, we should recognize the situation we're in today, and don't let someone else who doesn't even care much for you define the value or the meaning of your life. That's between you and the Almighty. So keep that in mind. Hasta luego, amigos.